Hi, everyone. This is Dawn Richard, also known as The Awakening with Dawn, and this is the Wake Up to Real Love podcast, where we share stories of struggles and triumphs of love, sex, and relationships, along with expert advice to create more conscious connections. I am super excited today because this is the third podcast of the three-part podcast series with my new friends and colleagues, Martina Hughes and Rod Gordon. Hi, Martina and Rod. Welcome back.
Hi, Dawn. Lovely to be here
again.
Hello,
Dawn. Thank you.
So Martina, for just as a reminder, for the last two sessions, Martina founded Tantric Blossoming in 2005, and it's now the largest Tantric community in Australia. Tantric Blossoming provides experiences for women and men to open their hearts and feel their innate aliveness of their bodies. Martina's heartfelt intention for this work is to empower people to discover, embody, and express their authentic selves. And Rod is a tantric facilitator, embodiment coach, and bodywork practitioner. Rod is dedicated to love, intimacy, and growth, and is committed to discovering the blocks that hold us back from the fullest expression of love. This is going to be a super juicy conversation today. I'm really excited.
Awesome. I look forward to where you're going to take us today.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to these questions.
Yeah. Before we dive in, though, I have to say a little something about the wildfires in Australia. I just want to send some well wishes and blessings to all the people that have been affected, all the land that has been affected, and the animals. That somehow we need to send our good energy back to the earth and healing for everyone.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's quite devastating, actually. It's huge, and even if the fires aren't affecting and us as Australians, there's an impact with people we know. Just everywhere around us, there's something happening, or someone being hurt or impacted by the bushfire.
Well,
so thank you.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, I think a lot of people think, oh, well, that doesn't affect me. I'm on the other side of the world. But it does. Every little piece of energy affects the next, right?
Definitely. Yeah. And because it is such a huge impact, it's so heartbreaking, and it's not just what's happening now, it's the long-term recovery for the people, the animals, the land. It's going to be a massive impact long-term as well.
But I know, I can't remember if you said it, Martina or Rod, but about, a lot of, or several other countries sending out their firefighters to help fight the fires, so this is one of the beautiful things that can happen within a disaster and trauma, is that people rise to the occasion. And I'm getting chill bumps as I'm saying this, that people really show up and help. This is what we all want to do: help each other and help ourselves.
Yeah, one of the things that shocked me about the fires specifically themselves, is they're so big and so hot, they're actually creating their own weather.
Yeah.
So they're actually creating storms. Yeah, I just found that to be amazing, that the heat rising and the smoke had so much effect. So, yeah.
So blessings to Australia.
Thank you.
Yeah. So this is actually a perfect segue, because it's about the energy of what's going on. And I know that Tantra is, a lot of people think that Tantra is just about sex. And I know that you both know that it's not. It's a whole life force, right?
Yes.
So I want to talk about the multi-layers of Tantra, because I know it affects you physically, psychologically, emotionally, spiritually, sexually, relationally. So I want to, with the two of you, to talk about how Tantra affects each aspect of both yourself and within your relationship. So I know last, with both of you and your individual interviews, we've really kind of focused on the embodiment of being in the body. So shall we start with the physical aspects of Tantra?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Tantra itself, I mean, in a lot of ways, it's simple as much as it's complex, but it really comes down to that awareness of being more aware, being conscious about who we're being, how we hold our energy, whether we're able to maintain our energy, whether we're dispersing it, what we're putting our energy towards. So it really boils down to awareness in everything that we do, and being able to be aware of how we interact with our own body, our own physicality, but then being, of course, much more aware relationally how that feels when we interact with another, how it feels when we interact and move in our families, our communities, our societies. So at the core of it all, there's this awareness, which comes back to, being connected to oneself.
Mm-hmm. How do you know when you're not connected to oneself?
Well, for me personally, when I feel disconnected from myself, there'll be a sense of rushing, a sense of dullness in my life, a sense of something missing. And I'll be irritable and out of sorts, in a way that, is not natural to who I am.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think that probably shows up in different ways for different people. How do you feel when you're disconnected?
It's an interesting question, because I think it shows up differently for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
For me specifically, when I feel disconnected, I'll usually be grumpy. That's like a go-to for me as a man. And yeah, the rushing, the fast pace, there's a sense of being really up in my head when I'm disconnected from my body, when I'm disconnected from myself, so to speak. And it's kind of it. The truth is, we can never actually be disconnected. So there's a kind of a paradox that exists in the question. We're never not connected. It's just that our awareness isn't there. And when we're not aware of the subtleties that are available to us, then that's what, for me, creates that feeling of disconnection. But until we slow down enough and resensitize ourselves enough, then we can't actually feel what's available to us. And what I mean by that is that, like, life's so, like, our current culture and social structure, everything is very entertaining, and bright lights, and the whole intention is to capture our attention,
like performing.
And so I see so much of that emulated in people's character, in like who we are as humans. Like for me, like, I don't get on Facebook, I steer clear of social media, because I would use those things as a distraction, and they can be used in like conscious ways for sure. But what I find is that the more involved I am in the distractions that are available in life, the less connected I am to myself. So when my attention's going out to, like, in social media, television, drama with friends or relationships or whatever else is out there, then my attention is going somewhere else. It's not free, and it's not available to me and what's going on inside my body. So they're good signs for me of disconnect. If there's a lot of attention, like for people listening to this, if they want to start to cultivate a deeper sense of awareness and feel some of the subtle energies that are available to us, is to start to spend a little bit more time away from that and feeling what's available in the body. Like, it's really powerful for men to cultivate a sense of stillness and silence, but for women to connect to their emotions and their feelings and to allow that to move through their body. And that's two really powerful ways for people to reconnect.
We talked about that last week, right? Your meditation practice and your body practice, right? the meditation and then the movement. So the karate or the dance or, you know, however you get into your body. So that sense of presence.
Yes.
And that literally means that our attention is available in that moment for whatever's happening, whether it's for us ourselves inside our bodies, for our partners, or say even, you know, available for you on this call. Our attention is here, not thinking about something else out there.
How do you manage, though, all of the responsibilities of life while still maintaining this presence in your body?
I mean, that's where qualities such as receptivity and responsiveness, I find. So I'm with what I'm with in that moment, and then I can be receptive to other things as my awareness needs to go to those other places. So, for example, after speaking with you today, I'll move into, you know, taking the cat to the vet. So then my awareness will be in that experience. And then I'll move into client sessions. So then my awareness will be there. So it's responding to the energy as it's needed, and then being receptive of like, well, what is this moment? What is this situation calling out of me? Does it need me to, you know, get things done in a business-like manner, for example, if I'm doing admin and other kind of business projects? Or does this situation require more of my heart and my compassion to come forward? So being able to respond and be receptive to the moment.
Do you find, I mean, this is the thing, it's like, it seems so simple and complex, just like you said, right? So as you were saying that, Martina, I was like, is this a constant thing that's going on in your head, or is this just a practice that you just train yourself to do? I mean, I say to do, but it's not really about doing, it's about being, right?
Yeah, and I think that's probably a good way to describe it. It's training yourself in a way to be, a way to live. And when we do that, new things become available to us. And like you said, the simplicity, like, I don't know how many times people told me to, like, how to breathe. Like, I remember thinking at one point, if one more person tells me how to fucking breathe, I'm going to lose my shit. It's like, I'm doing it,
I'm
man.
going to give him a karate chop.
That's right. It's like, I know how to breathe. I'm here. And years later, I'm teaching people how to breathe, like yoga. And like, the depth of our breath makes so much difference. And I think we touched on that in our call, like last week. But also, like, your question about how does it impact general life? Like, for me, it makes general life easier, because I have more attention available to process whatever's happening in the moment, to be available to feel what needs to come forward in the moment. Like, what does this person need from me? Like, if my partner's upset or she's stressed or there's something wrong, you know, say even with the cat going to the vet, my attention's free to be with what's happening in the moment, so I can give everything that I've got to give to that moment, to whatever is needed. And for me, that makes living life easier, not harder. And the simplicity of it's overwhelming. Like, it's literally learning to slow down, learning to feel more deeply, and to be more present. But the more we do that, the more we tune into our own bodies and feel what's actually available to us. But then we can, like, for me, the more I can feel in my own body, the more I can feel in another human's body, the more I can feel into the space around me, the more I can feel. I've had crazy experiences of, like, when I was in LA, I was going for a walk and I was walking past this hedge and I was doing a walking meditation. I'd been down to get one of those cool acai smoothie bowls. And as I was walking along doing my meditation, I walked past the hedge and there was a different plant there. And I was like, oh my God, that feels totally different. So I walked back and I could feel the different feeling that was or qualities that were coming off the hedge versus the plant there. But because I'd slowed down enough inside, my attention was available to feel the subtlety of the difference between the two plants. It's like smelling two different scents, but feeling two different feelings. Does that make sense?
It makes sense, but I'm imagining that a lot of people are going to go, "That's really way out there, Rod."
Wow. Okay. I'm going to pull right back because that's the start.
No, I mean, I get it, but a lot of people don't. And so, you know, I think this is the thing, that people are so busy, right? They're so busy going on to the next thing, thinking about what's next, thinking about what was, that to really, and we all talked about this last week, about really slowing down and being present. And, because we're afraid to feel our feelings, because we're afraid of what might be or what might not be. And so, how do you, it's like going back to this childlike state of only being in the moment. Right?
Totally. And that's where I think, even to make Rod's example of the hedge and the plant a little more perhaps obvious for people, it's like less crazy. Sorry,
I didn't mean crazy. I meant more like sort of woo, like it's really sounding kind of woo.
But it's like we have those responses to people. Like if we drop the judgments and the stories our mind has about people, there are some people that I might, let's say, even if I was on a train, I could sit on a train beside somebody and it feels good, easy, relaxing, and I might not even have a conversation, but it's easy to sit beside that person. I could sit beside a different person on the train and go, oh, something's not right here. Something feels uncomfortable. So it's that sense that every living thing, person, plant, animal, has its own energy. And that's not about things being good or bad or right or wrong, but my energy will interact differently with other people's energies compared to how your energy will interact with people's, compared to how Rod's energy will interact. So it's like there's a frequency created between two beings, and that's unique to everyone. And I think often children are really in tune with that, but often get conditioned out of it, because it's like, of course you've got to go and give Uncle Joe a hug. Of course you've got to, kiss Auntie Sue when you see her, like all of that doesn't happen so much now, but definitely when I was young, that kind of, needing to be polite to adults means that it gets conditioned out of kids, that instinctive responsiveness of how their energy relates to others.
Yeah, I think that's super, super important, because I feel like a lot of us, and myself in general, I would have these circumstances where I would think, am I just being judgmental, or am I just being sensitive and really honoring what this feels like for me? And, this is something that I've tried to tell my kids, like, I can say, oh, I feel okay about this person or about this situation, but you may have a completely different experience of this. And I think this is the tricky part when you're in a partnership, because you both have your different frequencies. And so how do you, sort of come together as witnessing what the other person's experience is versus your own experience?
I think that sort of touches on something that's really interesting about like what we do, in terms of that, like in a love and intimate relationship, people often have things they want from the other person that they think they need to get or feel. And so one of the things that we actually work with people on is like, how do you be the kind of person that would inspire or evoke that from another person? So one way of meeting that demand love and intimacy and relationship is like, who do I need to be and how do I need to show up to this moment to inspire those qualities out of my partner? Does that make sense?
That's a beautiful question. Can you repeat that, please?
I don't tend to speak from my head, but from my gut, so it won't be the same. But,
No,
but what it looks like is, there's like, if I want more, you know, love and affection from my partner or my relation, you know, in my relationship.
You can say Martina.
Yeah, Martina. Yeah, sure. I'm just trying not to make it, you know, anyone specific, but it's like, what kind of man do I need to be? How do I need to show up to inspire that out of her? How do I need to love her? Or how can I love her in a way that would evoke from her the, you know, the touch, the quality, or the affection, rather than demanding it, saying I need it, or having a sense of like I have the right to have affection in my relationship, or any of these types of thought patterns. It's like, okay, if there's something missing, how do I inspire that? And then it's giving that love, giving that attention, giving, you know, whatever is needed to the moment, and then seeing. Sometimes that'll come and sometimes it won't. And it needs to be a sense of that it's okay either way. You can't force someone into love or intimacy. So it's loving that person just, it doesn't, despite whatever's arising. It's having equanimity with what's available. It's like, I love this person and I want to be with this person. And if that isn't available right now, I'll wait till it is, and I'll just keep loving them until it is.
And what about, I'll give you, for instance, from my own circumstance. I mean, I'm a very affectionate person and my ex was not. And this was something that we would, you know, have lots of conflict about, because I would say, you know, I would really love it if you would hug me in the morning and at night when you came home from work, and, you know, before we went to bed, and, you know, or just touch me or grab my hand sometime, you know, like I want to feel, this is how I feel connected to you. And for some reason, you just wouldn't. And so how, you know, this is the tricky part of the relationship is, you know, how do you honor your own, how do you speak, you know, and say, this is what I would like in my relationship, and this is what I want to evoke. And how, I mean, how do you navigate sort of the balance between saying what works for you and if the other person says this doesn't work for me? I mean, how do you do that?
Great question. Yeah. Like for me, firstly, like in, you know, sacred intimacy, or in, you know, in a relationship like what Martina and have, like we're both committed to loving each other. And what you alluded to before when you were talking about the kids and life is curiosity. Having curiosity about my partner, being curious about what does she need? How does she like to be loved? Like, what does being loved mean to her? And so having a willingness to be curious about my partner is a great way to start. What you shared about your partner, like if a woman comes to a man and gives him that list of, I want to be hugged in the morning when I wake up, you know, before you go to work, when you get back from work, and before we go to bed, it lands like in the male nervous system as a list of chores that he has to do. And you'll get something like okay, yep, hug, done, radio, I did it, like kind of attitude if you get something, because it's landing like a list of demands. And it's okay to have a list of things and ways that you want to be loved, but I'd be curious as to where in his life was affection shut down. Where did he learn that it's not okay to give affection? And what's his discomfort around giving affection? Where is he hurting? What's the pain in his life that's stopping him from being able to give and receive like love through affection and touch? And start diving into the root of it rather than the demand at the end. Does that make sense?
No, it makes sense.
Yeah. And then starting to love and nurture that part, and having compassion for the part of him that was like, I know as a young boy, like it sort of faded out in my time, and I didn't have this with my dad, but emotions were very shut down. and it's not okay to feel. And so a large part of feeling and connection is touch. It stirs and evokes emotion within us. And if men aren't allowed to feel, then how can they touch and experience emotion? Like, shutting down a man's capacity to express emotion shuts down emotion, affection across the board. It's not just like, oh, you're not allowed to cry. That's the tip of the iceberg. But it's shutting down emotion across the board, across the range. His capacity to give love, his capacity to receive love, his capacity to be in a relationship or a connection with an intimate partner has been absolutely like sabotaged from the word go. And he's spent his life cultivating the skills to not connect to emotion. So then asking him to connect to emotion in a relationship, there's been no training or practice for that for the duration of his life. So however old the man is, if say he's 40 years old, for 40 years, he's practiced to not express or show emotion. Now, our Olympians only train for 4 years to get to an Olympic event. Well, they've probably trained all their lives, but they're practicing
Right.
all the time.
Right.
So if you practice to not experience emotion for 40 years, it's going to be deeply embedded in the psyche, in the body, in our whole being. So it's not something that can just be turned around by asking for affection. There needs to be a level of awareness about, where does this come from? Why is it there? And how do I love this man in a way that will support that to unravel and unfold, and his love and his expression can actually come forward? And then there has to be space for that in the relationship. So it's a big journey.
It's a big journey. I think, Martina, do you feel that this is pretty typical of men? Or the masculine, should I say?
I guess what's important, I just wanted to pick up on something Rod said. It's important that women don't start trying to fix the men in their lives.
Right.
So for me, that experience of, like Rod mentioned, seeing where a man's pain and shutdown comes from, there's two ways to approach that. And the kind of the masculine part of a woman, which is often leading the way for a lot of women today, the masculine part of a woman will try and go in there and fix a man, because I know I certainly have done my fair share of that in my life, and it doesn't work. What I've been more aware of in more recent years is allowing myself to be love and to offer love without demand. So the thing that can be deeply healing for a man is to receive and experience a woman who's simply being love and offering love without demand.
So what does that look like?
What does that look like? So for example, when Rod and I were first together, I would touch his arm and I could feel him just like nothing was happening. It's like I'd touch his chest, nothing was happening. And I was aware that was the part of Rod that had learned to protect himself.
His armor. I was just thinking armor.
Yeah. And I mentioned it to him, but I didn't like try and fix it or go down that hole with him. Instead, I just like kept offering him love through touch, through my beingness. He was, incredibly sexually responsive. So then even truly, truly loving and accepting and appreciating and, honoring him sexually started to heal and open other parts. It's like that became part of the healing pathway for Rod, was this sense of being sexually loved and sexually accepted. So it's like, supporting the part where there was connection flowing, so that then more openness could happen in the body. Now Rod's entire body is very sensitive and aware and connected to touch in any moment. And that's because of the love that we've shared and exchanged during our relationship. So just to go back to your question of what's typical for men, I think every man and every masculine energy is very, very different. A lot of men end up protecting themselves because they've felt emotionally manipulated or emotionally controlled by women. Because women, we're so expressive with our emotions, we have much more permission around our emotions. Men haven't had that, but often a woman will meet a man and she'll be like, tell me how you feel. I want to know how you feel about this, and how was it growing up for you, and how tell me how you feel about, you know, your divorce, and tell me how you feel about being a father, you know. And women, because we love talking about feelings and emotions, we can get really, you know, passionate and inspired by it. And a man's like, I don't know if I'm safe with you. I don't know if I'm safe with you. You know, a man will be like pulling his heart away. So the more a woman relaxes and simply is love in her own body, she comes back to that place of being love, sharing her own feelings, and then a man can go, oh, okay, this woman's, she seems to have a steady relationship to communicating and being with her own feelings. Maybe it's safe for me to open my heart and express my feelings more fully. And of course, that's not going to happen all the time. Sometimes people simply are incompatible. And I think it's important for people to recognize that sometimes a relationship will work and sometimes it won't. Because I think a lot of people or women have this tendency to keep trying to make the relationship work, make it work, make it work, make it work, and holding on to hope, when sometimes falling back, for a woman to fall back into herself and letting the truth of the situation reveal itself is much more empowering than her being over-invested, over-giving, over-trying.
And Rod, you were shaking your head like crazy when she was talking about, how do you feel? Tell me about, you're like, oh no, I don't want any of those questions.
Yeah, don't. Yeah. There's like, what am I experiencing? Is that what you're going to ask me?
No, just what is it like for a man to sort of feel that? I mean, it's sort of like badgering, right?
That onslaught. It feels like being violated. Like a man's heart is actually very, very sensitive. And you can actually see that if you watch little children. Little boys are usually highly sensitive. And so there is a part of men that is highly sensitive, and it's particularly around the heart. And that's where he'll have most of his armor and closure and protection will have built up over the years, because that the heart is such a sensitive space for a man. But yeah, violation is how it feels. It feels, there's so many ways to describe this, and I'm trying not to use the ones I know best. But
you can use the ones you know best. I don't care.
Yeah, Martina actually did a video about this, so I might let her speak to it because of the sensitivity of the conversation. But I think this would get it across to the viewers the best if you talk about the fingers in too early video. This is probably the most descriptive way of how it feels like in my heart, in my body, when a woman comes at me with that. Is the violation is the word that comes. There's no sense of seeing me, who I am, what I need, how I feel, who I am in that moment. There's just a sense of like, what can I get from you? It's like trying to have something yanked out of me, and it hurts. But
go ahead, Martina. Go ahead, Martina. I watched this, and it's very, very true.
Yeah. Well, I mean, my experience with men has been the men who look and present and appear the toughest often have like the most sensitive, beautiful, deep, and compassionate hearts. It's just that the tough exterior is in order to protect that sensitivity of the heart. And so in Tantra, we recognize that in a woman's body, the vagina is the negative polarity, so that's where we receive energy. The heart is the positive polarity, that's where we generate and direct energy. In a man's body, his heart is the negative polarity, so that's where he receives energy, and his penis is the positive polarity, so it's where he's directing energy from. So negative and positive in this context are not good and bad, but like the poles of a magnet, different charges of energy. And so this is even represented in the physicality of our bodies. Like women have breasts at the heart area, so it's like that positive charge coming out. Yeah, men's genitalia are external, so again the charge coming out. Woman's genitalia internal, energy coming in. So then if a woman considers the sensitivity of her vagina, the way she wants to be opened, to be loved, to be touched, to be cherished, and to be open at the heart before her vagina opens. You know, the vagina will not open if a man walks up and goes, "Hey honey, how about some sex?" and sticks his fingers in your vagina. It's violation. It's not okay. And so for a man's heart, we need to remember that a man's heart is the equivalent of a woman's vagina in terms of sensitivity, in terms of receptivity, in terms of being with another person's energy. So when a woman goes into that impassioned driving, like, how do you feel? What's going on for you? Tell me all about this. Tell me all about that. It's like she is sticking her fingers in too soon. And it's too much for a man. And this is why a lot of women end up believing that men are unfeeling. But it's not that men are unfeeling. Men need to feel emotionally safe with a woman before they open their heart. And it's sad because it starts for men when they're young boys, and they learn that in order to win their mother's love and affection, they need to do certain things. They need to behave a certain way. So then when they start moving into relationships with women, that dynamic is already set up of, oh, I need to please her to get the love, affection, intimacy that I desire. I need to be a good man. I need to do the right things. So a lot of men have switched off from even listening to their own instincts and desires because they've been taught from such a young age, I need to please her first, whoever her might be, in order to get the love and affection that I desire and need. And so I've seen a lot of men who kind of almost pretzel themselves when they go into new relationships, trying to be everything that the woman wants them to be. But of course, the shine goes off the relationship for both of them really quickly, because a woman's not attracted to a man who's flat out trying to please her. And the man doesn't feel very attractive himself when he's in that mode. So all of his attempts to be what she wants generally leads to, in the longer term, will lead to less sex, less affection, less connection. He needs to discover who he is at his core rather than how to please her.
Rod, what do you think it takes for a man to drop his armor? You know, like, because it's not about a woman prodding, you know, like, when does a man feel safe enough to just start expressing what's really going on internally for him? You know, when does he recognize that the woman feels safe enough for him to share who he really is, rather than, you know, that protection?
I think that point like has to come in a relationship consciously between two people having a conversation about it. It needs to be, it can't be done unconsciously. So without awareness, it can't just like happen. And this is the tricky bit. Like, a man could always find an excuse to not love, to not show up. It's like, oh,
run away.
You acted angrily before, so I can't be vulnerable anymore. I'm going to shut down. So he has to be willing to find a reason to open his heart. He has to find reasons to, like, physically think of reasons of why he should let her in, why he should express himself, why he should try and peel off these layers of armor that are actually there. So I think the first step is for him to be aware that that's happened and evolved throughout his life without him being aware. So that's what I would call something that's cultivated and learned without awareness, is what I would call an unconscious behavior. So there'll be lots of stuff that's happening that he's not aware of. So the first step is cultivating a willingness to be curious about what he can't see that might be actually there. So listening to his partner. So his partner might share feedback at different times lovingly without demand, as like Martina expressed before. So that might look like, I feel like you're closed off to me right now and you're unavailable. I feel this protection coming up and I love you, and that's okay. I just wanted to share that. And just allowing that to be, allowing him to rest with that information and giving him time to process that. Like, men process way slower than women. If you've been exercising your capacity as a woman to feel, it's been happening since childbirth. He might have just started a few years ago. So he's got a long way to go to learn how to process effectively. And I'm talking, it could take days to unravel. Like, something like that might take a week for him to process, to go, yeah, last week I was protected. I was keeping you at arm's length. So, I'm sorry about that, but it could take that long.
And Martina's like, yeah, I know, I've been sitting on that for the whole week.
Sorry, I just had to get the cat. Yeah. But it takes that love and that compassion and that allowing of space for a woman to allow a man to have his process. And then she needs to trust that over time, his capacity will get better. And if he's committed to that, he will. And so, a year down the track, he might be down to 1 or 2 days or 3 days. I don't want to put pressure on him, but, eventually it'll be minutes or seconds. So, but it takes time and it takes awareness that, he's going through something that needs to be unraveled. It's a lifetime journey. So that'd be the first step, is, both becoming aware that there's something there to unprotect, and then to be willing to trust and look for reasons to allow that to peel away, rather than to look for reasons not to. Because whatever you look for, you're going to find it. Doesn't matter. It'll pop up sooner or later. So it's kind of like, if you're looking for reasons that are going to encourage and support the relationship, it'll change. It'll grow. It'll build. The capacities will build. If you're looking for reasons to hide, you'll find them, and you'll hide, and you'll shrink and contract and get smaller and smaller. So it's very much a conscious choice is the best place to start that kind of process.
Do you think a lot of men are afraid of losing their sense of freedom?
Fuck yeah.
Thank you for your honesty.
Yeah, freedom's an interesting one for men. And if you inquire deeply, you'll find it resting under almost all aspects of men's choice making. And it's in almost every part of their life, is the desire to experience freedom. But it's very much, in terms of like masculine and feminine, the masculine experience of love, one way of experiencing that is through freedom. And that pops up in society everywhere. And it's really interesting. But yeah, men definitely afraid of losing their freedom.
Well, and I think, Martina, and you can speak to this, like men are afraid of losing their freedom, I feel like women are afraid of losing their connection.
Correct.
Totally.
Yeah, that's probably more accurate than you realize, but yeah.
No, I know. I feel like this goes back to the Garden of Eden, you know, where the disconnection, you know, like Adam lost his freedom and Eve lost her connection. And so this is the work that we are here to do, is to restore that for ourselves and for each other.
Yeah.
And I think also part of that journey is understanding, like we see this in the men that we work with. It's like freedom on some level it can be, you know, like freedom to do whatever one wants whenever one wants. But then as a man matures, he starts to recognize that freedom can come from who he's being on the inside, and that he doesn't have to push away from commitments in order to feel free. So, and a woman can support a man with that in a loving relationship by, you know, I know that if I get into directive mode with Rod, he feels trapped. He doesn't feel free. But by loving him and being generous with my love, being accepting of him and communicating from how I feel, then he gets to feel more free. Equally, from a woman's perspective, our desires for connection, sometimes we will grab at any form of connection. You know,
like pulling towards you.
Yeah, gossip, shallow connection, you know, drama, things to just fill our lives up. But on some level, those shallow connections will end up not satiating a woman. Whereas when we truly understand that love begins inside of ourselves, connection begins inside of ourselves, and we start being love from the inside, then everything changes, because when we're being love, we naturally offer love to others and then attract more quality love into our lives.
And so how does that emotive process help you feel connected to Rod when he's wanting his freedom?
Because if we look at love, connection, and freedom as external factors, we'll start to look at, a man needs freedom to do whatever he wants in a relationship, but a woman needs a man there for connection. But those will never truly satisfy or satiate those internal demands. Like a man has to discover freedom inside. He has to be free. And that means part of that is learning for his attention to be free. So we talked about presence before. Part of that is attention being free. So free feeling attention is probably the best way to describe presence. And what that means, like the freedom is something that comes from within. He has to connect to. And it's the same for a woman. Like Martina said, being love. Another way for me to say that is to allow love to move through you. So then the woman is actually connected to love. So the connection becomes that rather than the connection to the man. That's really way smaller connection than actually connecting to the feeling of love moving through you. And it's the same for a man. He needs to learn to find that freedom within and to connect to that, to be freedom. Because if we're talking in terms of masculine and feminine, that's not men and women. I'm not talking about gender. I'm talking about qualities of masculine and feminine, which we haven't sort of defined in any of these conversations. But the masculine experience of love is freedom. And so connecting, to that masculine part of me, man or woman, both need to connect to that sense of freedom. That's a very internal process, and meditation is a great way to get there. But the perception that a man's trapped, it's not real, it's not true. Like for me, the more I've committed to my relationship with Martina, the freer I've felt. And so
that's quite a paradox.
That's the first thing that I would teach a man coming into men's work, is to understand the concept of paradox. If you want to do anything with women, you need to understand paradox. But the truth is for me that I feel freer in my relationship than I did when I'm single. Does that land? Can you understand that?
It completely lands, but can you explain it to our listeners, please?
Oh, God, what are you doing for the rest of the day?
I know we might have to have several of these conversations.
Yeah, like it is a paradox, but how do I best to describe this? I feel freer in my relationship being committed to it because I'm being all in. There's a sense of that all my love, all my presence is in this relationship, that all Martina's love, all her presence is in this relationship. So within that, there's a sense of like, I am set free by, it's almost like the commitment actually set me free. It was, I remember specifically the moment I decided I'm dedicating my life inside this relationship to loving you and opening your heart. Like I remember I was actually sitting on the cliff tops at Santa Monica when I made this decision after doing a workshop with some teachers in the States. And ever since that moment, like I got freer in our relationship. So the perception of being trapped, it's like our field of vision is so narrow at that point. And it's, once I was fully committed to the relationship, that opened something in Martina. So there was like more love, more spaciousness in the relationship coming back at me. It was like the more deeply I committed, the more love I offered, the more I got back. So I don't have any sense of being trapped in my relationship at all. In fact, I have the exact opposite. Sometimes it's confusing. It's like, I don't really know what to do right now because I can do whatever I want. So there is that feeling there. But I think too, like part of what happens in a relationship, there's what feels like a demand from women towards men. And what that demand is, it's the loving demand for his conscious presence. That's what she wants to feel that loving connection. And so when a man shows up fully present to the relationship, there's a sense that commitment, that connection, that's made, it's there. She feels that. So then there's a sense of like, well, I don't need to grab for anything from this man. Right. It's already there. Right. So it's kind of like, that's where the freedom comes from. But you're not going to get that from a woman until you commit to her fully. And it's not something you can say, it's something you have to live. When she feels that, something in her will let go. But, you know, we also do like a daily practice of eye gazing for 10 minutes, which one of my teachers taught me in the States. And what I realized is like through that practice of just deep loving presence and connection, like when we'll eye gaze, we'll breathe together. So there's all specific things that we're doing that cultivate connection. Something's unlocked in that loving demand. Like it's almost like the desire for connection can be met in that moment, and everything else for the rest of the day is kind of like bonus time. So it's more love, more connection, like, and it's only 10 minutes, like it's a really short amount of time, but in that time,
depending on your perspective. We talked about that, Martina.
Yes, yeah. Dawn and I spoke about the eye gazing and how challenging even 1 minute of eye gazing can be for some people.
Yeah, right. Okay, yeah. I forgot about that. I've always enjoyed eye gazing, so yeah, I guess it could be, yeah. But so when, I guess that's probably the best way that I can answer it in terms of that experience of freedom. But there's something that happens, like a woman is incredibly intuitive. She's an incredibly powerful being, and men don't recognize the value of women in their life and what they can bring. But her emotions, her intuition, her feeling capacity will often bring more freedom to me than sense of being trapped, because she's so committed to like me being the best version of me as a man, and part of that requires me to feel, you know, happy, fulfilled, excited, passionate about life. And so she wants to call that out of me. And so she could be, have you thought about, looking into this or doing that, or researching this or researching that. And so, with the idea not for her to get something, but for me to experience more. So then that inspires me as a man. Like, she becomes way more valuable now, because it's like, shit, I would never have found this myself, and I would never have been this version of a man without her. And I don't know, like, for me as a man, and the men I've worked with have all had a sense of this, but there's often a fantasy as a child, a young boy, of being like a superhero or the best version of a man that we can be. Like, there's this dream, and so we will never find that on our own. It's highly unlikely that will ever happen. And so, but when you're with a woman who loves you in this way and opens that up, that opens up all those possibilities, because she's constantly calling for my presence, calling for my love. And that inspires me to be a better version of me as a man, which means I end up way happier with me when I look in the mirror than I would have if I hadn't met her. So well, does that sort of cover it a little bit?
Yeah. When you were talking about, experiencing full freedom, I feel like a huge part of that is just being your authentic self. Like, because when you show up fully free, you're free to say and to do and to be and to experience in the way that's unique for you. And, as Martina, allows you that freedom, it's like that, it's that cycle, right? So she inspires and evokes that in you, and then you can show up and say, well, I'm not trapped, because she's just, look at all she's offering me. She's offering me to explore.
And how that comes back out of me is I'm more devoted to her. The desire to worship her, to love her, to honor her, respect her, cherish her comes forward, like in my body. Like, as a man, it evokes that from me. It brings forward that part of me. It's just like, you're the most important thing in the world, and I'm going to do everything to love, honor, and protect you. So I'm going to show up. And so that inspires me and to love her in the way that she's always wanted to be loved. But to feel that, we do have to start with our connection to ourselves. Even then, like, this is freedom experienced in the relationship, but that's not something that can just be created without connecting to that within our own bodies first. So this can only come into the relationship because it's come in my body. It's coming through my body. Does that make sense? Like, I can't give anything of myself or inside myself until I find it. I could go and repeat all these words and talk about these ideas and principles and concepts, and it will never be embodied. It will never come into the relationship until I can live it, until I can practice it, until I can claim that within my own body. And there's no infrastructure for teaching this in our culture inside of our normal social norms, unless you reach out and look for, a sexuality or relationship teacher. You are not going to learn this stuff, whereas it should be taught in schools. I know somebody who's going to write a book about it. And so until people go out and learn this stuff, you can't make it conscious, can't bring it into a relationship. So it's absolutely imperative to seek out quality teachers that can actually teach this stuff, because otherwise it just all kept under the radar. It's not in the social norm.
Yeah, that's why we're having these conversations, Rod.
Exactly. They need to be had. Yeah.
So Martina, when Rod was talking about, what a woman wants, or how a woman, needs to be in order to evoke these things from a man, I wanted to ask you the same. How does a man need to show up in order to evoke what a woman needs?
How does a man... I feel like Rod answered that.
I think she wants a woman's perspective.
Or
experience,
right,
perhaps.
Okay.
Do you want water?
I think I've got one here. Okay. Thank you. So for me, in terms of how Rod shows up in our relationship to evoke that in me, and it's twofold, because if that's not alive in me, first of all, then Rod can't evoke that. So,
we know that it all begins with ourselves.
Yes. And one of the most common complaints I hear from women, and I've been guilty of this myself, is this complaint that he doesn't see me.
Mm-hmm.
And a man could turn himself inside out to try and see a woman, but if she's not seeing and feeling herself, that part still won't be satiated.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I will still have days when I'm, disconnected and down in the dumps, and I'll be like, Rod doesn't get me, he doesn't see me. And then, I'll go and do my own practices. And then all of a sudden, the next time I see Rod, it's like, there's like magic and sparks in the air. And it's like, oh, I connected back to me.
Mm-hmm.
And then the flow, the energy, the aliveness came back between us.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that aspect. So very much holding the space where each person is responsible for their own internal experience. In terms of what Rod brings, the more present Rod is with me, the more a man is able to offer his loving presence, again, without demand. That sense of, I'm here, I'm feeling you, I see you, I get you. That kind of loving presence without demand has my heart, my body, everything light up. Like after Rod spoke about that time where he made the commitment to our relationship, and when I felt that commitment and that kind of presence and devotion in him, like there was a part that was terrified. It's like, really? Can I trust this? Can I trust this? And I might have taken half a step back for a minute or two to
you may have needed a week to process that too.
Yeah, good week.
And because it, on some level, when somebody offers the very thing that I'd been craving, there's a part of my conditioning that has me go, I don't know if I can trust this.
I'm scared.
So
scared.
I needed to be able to process that.
Uh-huh.
But then once I felt the stability in where Rod was coming from, it's like feeling that stability, like, oh, he means it. He didn't just say it today and change his mind tomorrow. He still means it the next day and the next day. And the next week. So knowing that he was consistent and committed, and that he wasn't
running away
or running away. No, he's made this commitment and he's really made it, and there's stability there. Then I could relax and open, and then fully allow in his presence, fully allow in the gift of his devotion and love and his, everything that he wanted to offer to me, then letting it in so that my heart could melt, my body could soften. There was a lot more space and love and, real flow through my body, knowing that, he's there. He's there and he's not going anywhere.
When you were talking about that, I was just envisioning that tree analogy that you gave, that he's standing firm, and that you experience, because he's standing firm, that you can spread your roots, more stably, more securely. And because of that structure, that then you can expand in the same way.
Yeah, it's like the branches, the flowers, it's like there's a full blossoming that can happen, because my feminine's like, I can rest into what this man is offering. I can rest into that solid base offered by this trunk. Yeah.
It's, wow. I want a lot of that. I want a lot of that. I mean, when you were talking, I mean, you couldn't see Martina, but the way that she was looking at you was the sweetest. Like, it was really sweet. I know it was really sweet and beautiful. And I mean, this is the gift that you give each other, right? So I want to know how this all translates, okay? Because we've sort of talked about your physicality and your emotionality and a little bit of the intellect, sort of getting out of your mind, right, and back into your body and your emotions. So I want to know how this affects your spirituality and your sexuality. And you can talk about, because I know they're intermingled and merged as well. So can you speak to those?
I will, yeah. But before we move off the topic, there's one thing that I think we didn't touch on that sort of goes under the radar quite a lot.
Okay.
Quite a lot of, often I hear in men's tone and things they talk about that there's not a lot of value of a relationship in their life or a woman in their life. It shows up a lot. And I think one of the reasons for that is a man's heart being closed down and protected. Like, yes, it protects him from what he doesn't want to experience or feelings he doesn't want to feel, but it also protects him from the nourishment that a woman can bring to his life. And there's something about, you know, and like I know in my perspective of relationship for a long time, relationship was something that I offered a woman. It wasn't something that I got something out of. Like, you know, there wasn't like a feeling of reciprocal exchange. Yeah. And so in that, I think an important part of the conversation is like in that receptivity of a man's heart is within that lies part of the keys in unraveling that is he learns to be nourished by his woman's love and fed, which gives a lot more energy, excitement, inspiration, pleasure, like in a man's life. I don't know if I call it the vacuum cleaner up the bum look. But a lot of guys kind of look dead, like someone stuck a vacuum cleaner up their bum and just sucked the life out of them. This is like, yeah, they're just like, they're not enjoying life at all. They kind of look dead. And so part of that dead look is a good sign that a man's heart is closed, that he's not receiving that nourishment from life, love, intimacy, relationship, sex. If there's no capacity to receive, he's not going to be nourished by anything. And like Martina touched on, you know, touching my arm and my chest and there was nothing happening. There wasn't just nothing happening. I didn't enjoy it. Like I didn't like it. It was like a sense of like, oh, don't touch me. It was that like I didn't want to be touched. But the reason I didn't want to be touched is I didn't know how to receive that. Yeah. And I didn't know there was anything to receive in that touch. Whereas now there's a sense of through that touch, I feel recharged, rejuvenated, revitalized. There's a nourishing quality to a woman's love, and learning to be nourished by that is a really, really powerful thing for a man to experience in a relationship. And it certainly will elevate the value of relationship and connection in his life. And I think it's just an important thing to touch on, because quite often men will be like, oh, relationship, shit, we have to talk about this. And so there is a lot of value in it for a man. And part of that is learning to break down that barrier to receiving love. And I know for me, when I sort of started taking that journey and unraveling, I could see that right through childhood, even as an infant, I've pushed that away to protect myself from that sense of having love sucked out of me throughout my life. So there's like that loving demand, when it's unconscious, is experienced like when someone's not aware that they want love from someone, they'll suck it out of that person through questions and comments and asking them the way they interact with that person, that being. So it's like, I don't know if you've ever been around a person and walked away feeling completely drained from being with that person.
Yeah, it's called energy suckers.
All right. So that experience of having love sucked out of me as a man is very different to, say, walking away from a conversation with someone where you feel enlivened and alive and full of energy and inspiration.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's the difference that I mean. And so experiencing that within the container of the relationship and learning how to receive. And that's not an easy journey. And it certainly took me a while. And I feel like in lots of ways I'm still doing it. So I don't feel like any of these things have any sense of doneness to them.
No, it's an ongoing journey always.
It's an ongoing journey, and I just feel like that's a really important part for men to come into relationship with, is learning how to receive love. And until we do that as men, we will not get the value out of relationship that we want or that women would ideally love men to. But when we can come into that relationship to receiving love, then all of a sudden that changes the dynamic. When a woman's constantly offering a man love and it's not being received, that hurts. To give you love and just have it land nowhere hurts. And so there's no chance of success in the relationship if what we're offering is never being received. And so once we learn how to receive, then we can begin to start to dial in love and fine tune it to giving and receiving in ways that the other person can give and receive.
Well, and I feel like everything that you just talked about, I feel like that men, or the masculine in general, have only been conditioned to receive love sexually. So that's why there have been so many, I say this, that, you know, I feel like a lot of times sex for men is the way to get their touch needs met, to get their nurturing, to get their comforting and loving in ways that that are more socially acceptable. So that's why it is so important for men to learn how to receive outside the bedroom, so that once you transfer into the bedroom, then there's a whole nother, you know, level of receptivity and openness and vulnerability and you know, both giving and receiving.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, and I know you're going to speak to that. I think when it's the only way a man can receive and experience and give his love, then there becomes a neediness attached to that, a need for sex.
Right.
Whereas Martina touched on before about the positive and negative polarities, so the giving, you know, and receptive parts of ourselves. And a man's positive polarity is his penis. So the desire to give love through sex is really strong in a man. And for that reason, that's where love wants to move out of his body. But men are so disconnected from their sexuality, from their penis, that there's no capacity to really cultivate that in a way, cultivate it with awareness. I can feel you're dying to speak, so I'm going to shut up.
No.
I feel like this is more your field, so I'm going to step aside.
All right, Martina. So how does Tantra come into this space?
I mean, there's so much. There's a part of me that feels cautious just in this moment, because I'm aware that there's so much healing that needs to happen in relationships and between men and women. And, you know, Rod and I work with a lot of incredible people and see people making changes all the time. So part of what I'm cautious about is, you know, that it can sound a little bit like everyone's messed up sometimes when we have these conversations.
Just me.
No, we all have challenges. That's all.
Yeah. And I think it's really important to be aware that just starting to bring simple everyday awareness, breathing, feeling, presence, love, you know, feeling things in the body, being present in the body, can start to shift the dynamic in the relationship. So, you know, where Tantra comes in is the realization that, yes, we're human, yes, we're spiritual, we are all of that. And for me, this journey is so much about, well, how do we relate to each other in a way that supports us to be fully who we are, to not be restricted or contracted by these human bodies, but to be everything we know how to be, you know, to open up to our spiritual gifts, to open up to our human gifts and bring all of that together. So having the gifts that Tantra offers through breath, movement, meditation, you know, whatever practice people like to bring on board, some form of presence and flow in the body, presence for the masculine part, flow for the feminine part, being able to have those experiences internally, we can start to create the internal union for each man and woman to know their internal union of masculine and feminine, because when we know that internal union, if I know my own capacity for direction, for presence, for strength, and I know my capacity for love, for receptivity, for flow, then
that's masculine energy and feminine energy.
Yes,
yeah.
If I have both the masculine and feminine capacities alive in me, then I'm not so hungry and needy in my relationships, which means that then I can be more fully expressed in my relationships. But also, me being more fully expressed is an invitation for, you know, for Rod, for my partner, to be more fully expressed as well. So then we come into that place where there's this union internally for each individual, but then the deeper union in the relationship between people, because we're being that more expressive, more expanded version of ourselves.
I was thinking when I saw your video about the, you know, the inner breath orgasmic experience, I was thinking, okay, when you're in that space, you're totally just present with yourself. And so how does that also translate into the bedroom with your partner? Because you're just present with yourself, and yet you're also completely connected with them. Like how does that work? How does that work?
Yeah.
It works well.
Well, it's
because in a way it's sort of selfish, like because you're just so present in your own body and your own experience. But how do you also maintain your presence with and for your partner simultaneously? Or does it, or is it like you just have to take turns?
No. I mean, one of the fears that can come up.
You get what I'm saying, Rod, right?
I do. Yes.
I've heard men in the past say, well, if a woman's fully orgasmic on her own, what's the point of a man? And for me, there's something that I can open to in myself. Yes, that is beautiful and orgasmic and expansive. Sharing that with a partner amplifies it, because it's not just my energy, it's two energies.
Right.
So there's even more energy available. And then actually probably one of the ways to illustrate it is to speak about what I see as the common experience of sex is all about performance and pleasing.
Right.
So having sex in let's say a conventional manner is all about what can I do for the other person to please them? How do I need to perform for them? And in that space, there's not much energy or sensation moving through the woman's body when she's like, what do I need to do to make him come? What do I need to do to make sure he has a good time? There's nothing in here in her body that's happening in her mind, because she's trying to figure out how to give him the mind-blowing experience based on what she read in Cosmo last week, or whatever the current thing is.
Right.
So performing and pleasing is a disconnected and detached experience. The place where a man experiences a lot of pleasure is via a woman's pleasure. So when a woman is truly embodied in her pleasure, men love that, because
how many times was that again?
Infinity.
Well, no, it's really funny that you say that, Rod, because I always say, you know, it was like, you know, two holes or two halves make a whole. You know, people like, oh, you complete me, right? And I say, no, two holes equal infinity, because it's like you have this capacity for your own expansion and experience, and then your partner has their own capacity for their expansion and experience. And that's why it's so important for both to meet together, because it is more than just 1 + 1. It's like infinity.
It is. So when I'm connected to the pleasure and the orgasmic capacity of my body, I'm feeling myself and feeling Rod at the same time. You know, I can be aware of the sensitivities, the pleasure, the nuances that are moving in my body, and be aware of what's happening in his body at the same time. So
even with your eyes closed, Martina?
Yes, even with my eyes closed. I often feel more with my eyes closed.
That's probably actually true.
Yeah. So it means that it's not about, like, even if I'm giving pleasure to Rod, let's say if I'm giving oral sex to Rod, we've probably just upgraded this to a warning for graphic content. But if I'm giving,
I'm not demonstrating.
No subjects are taboo, but yeah, no demonstrations here, please. Thank you.
But I can be giving oral sex to Rod, which, you know, is an act of giving, and I can be receiving and experiencing huge pleasure and orgasmic capacity in my body at the same time. I can be feeling the sensations of his penis in my mouth. I can be feeling my vagina, my breasts, my heart responding to that level of connection and intimacy between us. I'll also be aware of Rod's breath and the movements in his body.
Like everything's tingling.
So everything, it's like hyper kind of on, but not in a detached hyper way, but just a super aware, everything's included kind of way.
Really more conscious.
Alive.
Yeah.
More conscious. Way more conscious.
Yes. So it's not just about me, it's not just about him. I'm feeling all of that, and from what I understand, Rod has a similar experience of feeling himself, feeling me at the same time.
Yes, Rod? Yes, Rod?
I'm just reflecting on Martina's share quite deeply.
We're all reflecting on Martina's share.
Let's reflect together. I totally forgot what you asked me. I really was reflecting on my share.
It's about your experience.
Feeling yourself and feeling me at the same time.
Yeah, like for me, that's probably one of the most amazing sexual experiences I've had, is to have that, you know, my partner going down on me and orgasming at the same time. It's like, first it was confusing, but it was also the most amazing experience I've ever had. I think the more connected we are to the subtle sensitivities in our own body, the more we can feel all of them at the same time. So there's a sense of like being present in that moment includes my partner. But one of the things I've found is that, you know, my body can feel what's happening in her body. So her pleasure escalates my pleasure. As I've become more sensitive in my body, sensitive to the physical sensations, the emotional sensations, that, you know, the sensation of love moving through my body. It's like when we're making love, it's not really like it's two bodies, one practice. Does that make sense?
Well,
so
it's the merging. It's the merging.
Yeah. So in that merging, there's a merging. So there's a sense that I can feel what's happening in her body. I can feel what's happening in my body. So the amount of love that's moving through both of us in that moment is magnified. So it's an amazing experience. I wish it for everybody.
Yeah, me too.
But it's like there isn't a separation of the two bodies. It's not like I'm just focused on my body and my breath and my pleasure. Like you know, when we're making love, I'll actually align my breath with Martina's breath. I'll actually look into her eyes, and yes, sometimes she does close her eyes, and it's beautiful to watch. So there's a sense of like, the more pleasure she can show me that's moving through her body, the more pleasure I actually experience, the more love that I experience. So the more love that she can allow to move through her body, the more love that I'll experience. So, and it's the same in reverse. The more pleasure that I can animate and show through my body, the more pleasure Martina will actually experience if I just sit there still as a rock, or lay there in this instance and just don't show any pleasure. There's a kind of sense of like, oh, am I doing it right? What's going on? What's happening? I can't feel him. He's just like, it becomes very performance orientated. But like, when I'm allowing what I'm feeling to be expressed and be shown and be felt, the more I feel it in my body and allow myself to feel it, give myself permission to feel that, the more she can feel that in my body. So then that's where it becomes more about animating love that's in the relationship than it does about performing some kind of sexual show or whatever.
And is that the ultimate freedom and connection?
Both at the same time, I guess. So yeah, absolutely.
Because that's where I feel like all aspects of ourself, if we allow ourselves to be open and receptive, that's the divine.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
That's the divine presence working through both of us to merge into this beautiful expression of love.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And that's what it becomes when two people are offering love in the moment while making love, rather than performing something they've seen or heard or trying to achieve some specific goal. Especially like as a man, if like my goal is to make her orgasm, then my thoughts, my mind, my energy is directed there. If my goal is to make me orgasm, then my thought, my mind, everything's directed into that woman. But when my attention's not on those things, it's on how can we, make love together and magnify that. That's when that starts to happen.
I wish that for everybody.
Yes.
Truly.
Yes. Absolutely.
Because I don't think very many people know how to experience that.
No.
Which is why your work is so beautiful.
And I do believe that if people knew how to make love with more awareness, more presence, more love, there'd be less conflict in relationships.
Yeah.
I think that often underlying the conflict in relationships is this sense for a woman of not being satiated in the longing of her body, which has a sexual content to it as well. And for a man, often underlying a man's discontent is that not being accepted sexually and loved sexually. Yeah.
Yeah, because if our desire to give love does come through the penis, so when sex isn't wanted in a relationship, like my experience of that, which I don't have in this relationship, is that my love's not wanted, I'm not wanted. And if my sexual desire is discarded or made less than, or then it feels like my love is discarded and made less than, but in with that I am, and that I am therefore worthless, and there's no value to me in the relationship. And so then why bother? Like as a man, it's like, if there's no purpose, what's the point? Right. So a lot of that, gets cast aside.
I feel like maybe if the two of you talked about this aspect, like started with that, then all the other stuff, because people who would not say, oh my gosh, who wouldn't say, oh my God, I want that. I want more of that. How can I experience that? Because this is, I feel like this is our journey to feel and be and experience as much love as possible on this earth, in this lifetime. I don't know about other lifetimes, but right now, right here and right now.
Yes.
So how can I learn to be present to all the potential and possibility within me? you know, as I'm exploring all aspects of myself and exploring all aspects of my partner and being witness to both and sharing that both. So you do experience this beautiful ultimate freedom to be who you are, and ultimate connectivity to be merged and connected with your divine spirit and your heart and your soul and each other. I mean, what an amazing, amazing experience.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's the experience we offer people. That's the journey we take people on. And yeah, the way to do that, to start that at home, is be curious and be generous with love. People are often really stingy with their love. It's like, I'm going to love when I feel safe, or when this person does this, or I'm going to love when this person does that. Like, fuck
I'll
that.
give
Just
you
love
and you give
flat
back.
out.
Right.
Yeah. So love, don't be stingy with love. Love flat out. Give as much as you can, but to have the experience that you're talking about, we have to be willing to give that experience. And we will experience as much through our own giving as through receiving or getting back.
Well, and I think too, like you said, Martina, is just, well, both of you said, not just giving, but being that love.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So is that your definition? Because it's about time for you to go, Martina. I know you have someplace else to be.
Yeah.
Yes.
So is that your definition of real love for the two of you?
I feel like it's only like a part of it, but as an overall skimming of the surface, yes. Yeah. Because like, so many of the things that we've spoken about are whole conversations within themselves. So this really is just we're not even really touching the surface of what this is about, but it's enough to give people an idea of like what it is that's available, some of the things that can be achieved. There's so much more, and there's so much more to it all, but it is also, as we said at the start, really simple.
Well, it's an exploration and an ongoing journey. It never stops.
Yeah,
no,
absolutely.
That's both. There's a paradox in that. There's beauty in that, and there's intense pain in that. So it's a beautiful thing.
I mean, just witnessing the two of you is like, I'm like, oh, there's hope for me. I want that. This is what I want in my next relationship. You know,
you can create that.
Yeah, it's creating it, it's being it, it's finding it within myself, you know, so that I can give it to somebody else and share it, you know, have the co-creation. And the two of you have a beautiful co-creation, both in work, professionally and personally. I mean, the magic between the two of you, it's just so beautiful for me to watch. So I'm really honored and grateful that you shared this with me today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dawn, for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us. Thanks for the opportunity to share.
I would love to have many more of these conversations if you are willing, because I do feel like, you know, we're just talking about it's not the surface, because it's a lot of depth, but you know, there's so many subjects within each subject. So
definitely.
So thank you so much for being here, and
you're welcome.
I can't wait to have more of these. Please, please, please.
Yes, you can do that.
Yes.
Yeah, for sure.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Dawn.
Thank you for the opportunity to share and the opportunity to have these conversations and to get them out there for people to hear, experience, witness. Beautiful.
Yeah. So all of my listeners, why don't you go ahead and say, Martina, again, where people can find the two of you?
Sure. So you can find us at tantricblossoming.com. So it's TANTRIC blossoming.com, or rodgordon.com, or martinahughes.com.
And you're both on Facebook, so find you. And on their website, they have lots of blog articles. There are lots of workshops and seminars and coaching. I mean, you guys are doing it all. So I really honor you for your work. And I know that you're changing a lot of lives, and you will continue to do that. And you're totally an inspiration for me. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dawn.
And so for all of my listeners, if you like what you heard, which I can't imagine anybody not, because this is mind blowing, and it's going to completely transform your life and your love and your relationships. So please subscribe to the Wake Up to Real Love podcast and share with your friends. Give any feedback or recommendations or suggestions of what things that you would like, what conversations you would like to have more of. And to find me, I sort of specialize in overcoming heartbreak and betrayal and creating more real love in your life. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram at The Awakening with Dawn. And as we've talked about and said numerous times, it all starts with you. The most important relationship you'll ever have is the one you have with yourself. So thank you again, and everybody wake up to more real love. Take care, you guys. Thanks again, Martina and Rod.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. See you next time. Bye, listeners. Thanks.